Good evening and welcome everybody to this first livecast of the new international project Climate Citizens Assemblies, learning from, for and with Europe. My name is Charlie Fiedeldij-Dop. I'm a program maker here at Pakhuis de Zwijger, and I'm also, full disclosure, one of the co-initiators of this project, together with Eva Rovers, my studio guest. Tonight is the beginning of a 4-month collective learning process. We are going to explore how climate citizen assemblies can, on the one hand, help us to contribute to effective, sustainable and just climate policies, and on the other hand can also contribute to strengthening our democracy and making our democracy more 21st century proof. It's my honor to be your moderator this night and to guide you through the conversations and the stories of our international speakers. But I also encourage you as our audience to contribute, to participate and to ask your questions and share your knowledge with us. You can do this by logging in on our website through Zoom. There's a Q&A function that you can use to ask questions to the speakers, either the speaker here in the audience or our speakers on Zoom. Please address the speaker that you want to ask your question to. That question will be sent to me and I will try to include that into the conversation. So please join us into making this evening even more special. So, as I mentioned before, my partner in crime, Eva Rovers, is here with me in the studio. She's a local expert on climate citizens assemblies here in the Netherlands, and she's also the co-founder of Bureau Burgerpraat. Welcome, Eva. Great that you're here. So before you're going to tell us all about this project that I've already mentioned several times, please, let's just start at the beginning. Could you give us a brief introduction to what a Climate Citizens Assembly actually is and what it does?
Yeah, well, a Citizens Assembly is a group of about 150 ordinary citizens, and they are randomly selected. So really to make sure that they are a fair representation of society as a whole in terms of gender, age, ethnicity, education level, geography. And over the course of a few months, this group of people, they get together, they investigate, they discuss, and they make recommendations on a specific, often very complex political topic. For instance, how do we as a country act on the climate crisis? And you can use Citizens Assembly for a whole range of topics, but in this program we want to focus on climate citizens assemblies, as it is becoming apparent that climate change is not only a threat to our environment, but also to our democracies. It deepens inequality, it fuels civil unrest, and it leads to political deadlock. So that's also the reason why a growing number of European countries is experimenting with climate citizens assemblies. One of the first citizens assemblies on climate was organized in Ireland in 2016, followed by France 2019, 2020, and one in the UK of this year. And currently Germany, Spain, Denmark, Scotland and the Netherlands are either considering or preparing citizens assemblies. So you can say that citizens assemblies, climate citizens assemblies are gaining momentum throughout Europe. However, experiences are still few and none of them have been able to reach their full potential. So, and also when it comes to actually organizing these citizens assemblies, many countries are, sort of say, reinventing the wheel. So therefore it's essential that we increase and share knowledge about them. And that's why we developed this project, Climate Citizens Assemblies, Learning with, from and for Europe. And this project consists of 4 livecast sessions like this one, and a knowledge platform for collective learning. And the main goal of this project is to connect and strengthen these networks throughout Europe of people, policymakers and social movements working on climate citizens assemblies. But climate change will not wait for us. So it's important that we learn quickly from each other, exchanging lessons among countries as effectively as possible, and so that we can together empower citizens to battle climate change and to boost our democracies. So this is also a question for people at home. If you are in any way involved or interested in climate citizens assemblies, please take a look at our website and reach out to us.
Yeah, and then to add to that, so we just started it today, so we're going to build upon this platform. This knowledge platform is going to grow, and we also hope that we can make it grow by your contributions. So please connect with us. So if you're interested, but you're a beginner in the field. Keep a lookout on our website. Follow the events that are going to happen, and then you will soon be directed to the knowledge platform as well. But if you are yourself actively engaging with a Climate Citizens Assembly in a European country or elsewhere, I think also, of course, outside of Europe, we would be very interested to hear from you. So please then send an email to me, which is charlie@dezwijger.nl. So you also see the email below if all goes well. Send an email to me. Let me know about the initiative that you're taking, the role that you're playing, and then we can also see if we can include your knowledge, your expertise, and your practices into the platform. So this is again the call for the audience. Please let yourselves be heard. Okay, so it's my pleasure to introduce to you our 3 international guests, all joining us through Zoom. Art O'Leary, the Secretary General to the President of Ireland and one of the key players in the Citizens' Assemblies in Ireland. Cathy Conn, she's an activist and the external coordinator of the Citizens' Assembly Working Group of Extinction Rebellion in the United Kingdom. And then Martin Gerwin, PhD specialist in sustainable development and deliberative democracy, and also a designer and a coordinator of Citizens' Assemblies in Poland. So we have a wonderful panel. Welcome. Great that you are all here. We have asked each of you to briefly introduce us to the climate citizens practice that has been organized or is being organized in your country. So please take us into your world. Who initiated the project? Which issue was being considered? How were the participants selected? And what was the outcome of it? We're going to go. Well, I'm going to give you a turn, one by one. I'm going to start with the Secretary General to the President, also because I don't think we actually have someone in this role in the Netherlands. So it's extra special role for us to introduce. Art O'Leary, please, if you would be so kind to tell us about the Citizens' Assembly that you were a part of in Ireland.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and greetings from the President's home in Dublin, in Ireland. It's extraordinary to me that my role setting up and designing the first Citizens' Assembly, which was called the Constitutional Convention, was 8 years ago, and I'm still being asked to come and tell stories about it because it has really become the model by which hard issues get dealt with in Ireland. For context, we have just concluded last Saturday our third Citizens' Assembly, which dealt with, between the 3 of them, 19 separate issues. So the one on Saturday was on gender equality, and they made it's a very, very serious piece of work with some extraordinarily powerful recommendations. But I might just start at the very beginning, back in 2013, when we created the first Constitutional Convention, and it was slightly unusual, and I'll go into this maybe in the second session, but it was a mixture of politicians and citizens, and it worked well for a number of reasons, but basically it was 100 people in a room for a year who were asked to look at 14 separate issues, everything from our electoral system to blasphemy to marriage equality to voting age, the length of the presidential term, a whole big bucket of issues. And it turned out like that because following the general election, in the program for government formation process, anything that the different parties couldn't agree on, they put in this bucket and they outsourced to what was called then the Constitutional Convention. And I was working in the Parliament at the time. I got a call from our Prime Minister who said, listen, there's this thing in the programme for government called the Constitutional Convention. It doesn't sound to me as if it's ever going to work, but it's in the programme, so we have to do it. you look as if you're the kind of fella who might be interested. I was director of parliamentary committees at the time. And so we had a conversation, and Ireland was in the middle of a financial crisis at the time. And we were rooting around the back of the sofa for money to pay our teachers and our nurses and everything. So I had this conversation with the Prime Minister, and at the end of it, I said, well, it sounds to me as if, well, this may not work. It may or may not work. But I've got two basic rules here. One is don't kill anybody, and two, don't spend any money. And the Prime Minister said, yes, I knew you were the right fella for me. You know, so we had a number of challenges, obviously. One is because this was brand new. It had never been heard of before. And we adopted an approach where we asked the polling company to recruit the citizens. So we had 33 politicians made representative of all the political parties, and we had 66 citizens who were to be randomly selected from the electoral register, but also to be representative of Irish society. Now, these are two very different things, really, because you can either be randomly selected, which would mean that we could have ended up with 66 men or 66 people from Munster, or they can be representatives of Irish society, which meant 33 men, 33 women, et cetera, et cetera. So we focused on a hybrid of that, and we sent a polling company out into towns and villages and cities all over the world, all over the country. And you can imagine, knock on the door, excuse me, the government asked me to come and see if you will spend a year in a room with 99 other people for no money to discuss some issues which the government think are important, you know. And with the police were called on a couple of occasions because they thought that people were casing their houses for burglaries because they'd never heard of this thing. And it was very difficult because we had one person in every 40 doors that we knocked on said yes. Because if you can imagine turning up in a tiny village in the west of Ireland with a recruiter there with a piece of paper that says, I need a woman between the age of 25 and 44 and a man over the age of 66, and then knocking randomly at doors on Main Street, Ballyhaunis, you know, to go and find somebody. And to complicate matters, because we had such a great number of issues to deal with, we recruited substitutes. So for our 28-year-old professional architect from the west of Ireland, if for whatever reason she couldn't attend a meeting, we had a 35-year-old professional engineer, female engineer from somewhere else in the same region. So we needed a citizen and a substitute citizen. They're identical twin in polling terms as well. So that was very important. And once we had done the recruitment, we then set around creating an agenda for how we would tackle all of these issues. The really big one in the first Citizens Assembly was marriage equality. You know, and I should say that the Citizens Assembly model is well known in Ireland now as being a way of dealing with difficult subjects, because the two most polarizing issues in good old Catholic Ireland over the last 50 years have been the subjects of abortion and marriage equality. And two separate Citizens Assembly safely navigated these difficult issues by creating a forum in which people could safely talk about these issues, you know, and the chairman was terrific because at the first meeting, he set out 5 principles by which the Constitutional Convention was going to work. You know, he said we were going to be transparent. Everybody gets to see everything, you know, and not just the members, but we live streamed it. We put all the documentation on a website. So it was totally transparent. Everything was fair. So if one side of an argument got half an hour to make a presentation, we found somebody to make a half-hour presentation on the other side of the argument as well. Equality of voice was really important because we had politicians here who like to talk a lot and they have an opinion on everything. And we had an 82-year-old former postman who didn't feel as if he was qualified enough, you know. So we managed conversations along those lines to make sure that the former postman got the same amount of time at a table discussion as did political party leaders and ministers, etc. Efficiency, again, we had no money to run these things. So actually, as it happens, it didn't matter so much about having very little money, because that allowed us to be much more creative. And because we'd never had one of these before, there were no boundaries. You know, I wasn't supposed to kill anybody and I wasn't supposed to spend any money. But other than that, I was allowed to do whatever the hell I wanted. And it was absolutely terrific. And the final issue, which was very important too, was the final principle was collegiality. You know, I did say at the first meeting that I'd never had 100 bosses before, but I was looking forward to the experience. So we set about creating a very collegiate atmosphere. We ate together, we drank together, and some of the sessions ended up like Irish weddings, where people stayed up all night afterwards in the bar, you know, talking. And they went from being deeply suspicious at the very beginning of politicians to the final meeting, where there were hugs and kisses and tears. And some of our citizens were so imbued with public service afterwards that they joined political parties and ran for election, you know, so they got really into it. So
wonderful.
I know my 5 minutes are up now.
Your 5 minutes are up.
That's a sense of what it is. Ireland has used this, and our second Citizens Assembly dealt with the subject that you're talking about now. And the question they were asked was how the state can make Ireland a leader in tackling climate change. And to cut a very long story short, they dealt with that issue over a number of months at the Citizens Assembly. They made recommendations to a parliamentary committee, which examined all the recommendations and endorsed many of them and sent them on to government. And the government last month finally published a climate change bill, which provides statutory provisions for the recommendations of the Citizens Assembly. So thank you. I'm looking forward to this evening. I'm dying to hear about the other experiences.
Yes.
And I'll be very happy to talk about all of the things that we found hard in the experience in the next session.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Wonderful, Art. Thank you so much. We're just going to continue, and then later on we have a discussion with all speakers together. So save up all the info that you still want to share with us. Kathy Kahn, I would like to pass the word towards you. You are an activist and the external coordinator of the Citizens Assembly Working Group at Extinction Rebellion UK. Thank you for being here. Could you give us a brief introduction to the Citizen Assembly process that was being done in the UK?
Yes, this is going to be a little bit drier because I wasn't actually present there, so I'm going to report to you about the process.
Yes.
So the question that they dealt with was how can the UK reduce greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050. It was commissioned by 6 parliamentary select committees who framed the question. These are cross-party committees that only advise Parliament. They have no power. The government is guided by Parliament, but basically decides on its own what it's going to do. So the Citizens Assembly had no support nor acknowledgement by the government at all. The undertaking from the 6 committees was that they would study the recommendations and decide if they could use them to advise the government. Interestingly, the government department responsible for environmental protection was not one of them, was not one of the 6 committees. Oh. So 30,000 invitations were sent out. 110 UK citizens were selected by sortition and then stratified across 7 characteristics, one of which was level of concern about climate change. At the end, 180 citizens took part between the ages of 16 and 79. They met in Birmingham, not London, and between January and May. The 3 weekends were face-to-face. But with the pandemic, the 4th weekend was forced online and in actual fact was stretched over 3 short weekends to take account of adapting to being online. It was funded by the House of Commons and 2 independent foundations, not by government, and it was £520,000. quite cheap at the price. After the initial learning process, they were randomly selected again into 3 groups to hear detailed evidence on specific areas for reducing emissions. And they were how we travel, heat and energy use in the home, what we eat, and how we use the land. There was emotional support in place for members going through the learning. Some people can be affected if they felt distressed or overwhelmed. In Birmingham, this was a quiet room. And when they went online, it was a phone number, both supported with facilitators. During the 3 online weekends, they heard further evidence, including presentations on different ways of removing greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, and arguments about the extent to which the UK should or should not rely on these technologies in order to reach the net zero by 2050 target. Interestingly, in the last session, it was online, there was an add-on question. And the question was, is there anything else you would like to tell government and parliament about how the UK should get to net zero? So they didn't hear any new evidence to inform their vote. So their decisions were actually based on their own experiences, their values, views, and the information they'd already learned throughout the assembly. And following these they had small group discussions, suggestions were voted on, and 39 additional recommendations were put forward. The end game was the Citizens Assembly produced a 556-page report in September with more than 50 recommendations, most with 80% or more support. I'm not going to give you a rundown of all the recommendations, which were very much what you would have expected, nothing radical, considering the date and the range of evidence that was presented to support that date. But what was of note is that the additional final question that I just mentioned actually gave the members the freedom to come up with some of their own conclusions. And they themselves highlighted more systemic issues, which the Citizens Assembly hadn't addressed, on themes including transparency, accountability, international action and impacts. The key recommendations included a call for government leadership, working across political parties, that's a good one. They wanted independent, neutral monitoring and reporting on progress. And one I rather liked was much more transparency in the relationship between big energy companies and the government due to concerns over lobbying and influence. This received 94% support. So what's happened since? In November, there was a House of Commons debate. The resolution thanked the citizens and called for the government to take note of the recommendations in its policies to achieve 2050 targets. No clear action point, and that's hardly surprising since the committees themselves have no real power. And finally, one of the 6 committees has just launched an inquiry to review the progress that the government has made in implementing the proposals, which is good, but it isn't the independent inquiry that the Citizens Assembly itself called for. So there was overall an enormous lack of independence in the process. There we go.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Completely different story already than how Art introduced his case study. We're going to go to the last example, and then we're going to join into conversation with all of you. And our last speaker is Marcin. I'm saying it. No, I practice this differently. Marcin Gerwin. Apologies, Marcin. As I said, you are a specialist in sustainable development and deliberative democracy, but you are also a designer and coordinator of citizen assemblies in Poland. can you bring us a bit into your world? What is going on in Poland when it comes to citizens' assemblies?
All right, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join you for this evening. So we have actually experience with citizens' assemblies on the local level. They have taken place in 4 cities so far, and actually 2 of them in the Poznań and in Krakow are ongoing. The one in Warsaw was completed last year, and the same was, and Wrocław was completed last year as well. And I wanted to share with you some special features of the Polish citizens' assemblies. And one of them is that all of them were initiated by the groups of activists. Here in the middle, you can see the mayor of Warsaw, and besides him, the young people there are members of the Fridays for the Future. And also there was a coalition of other NGOs and activists in Warsaw who collected signatures, because in Poland, on the local level, in some cities, it is possible to legally apply to the mayor to organize a citizens' assembly. And it was this mechanism, this legal mechanism was used also in Krakow. And here is Wrocław and the city of Poznań. Extinction Rebellion had a crucial influence there in initiating the citizens' assemblies. And in the city of Krakow, it was Fridays for the Future. So what about the outcome of the whole process? So from the very beginning, there is this political declaration that the results will be treated as binding when they reach the level of support of at least 80%. And in this photo, you can see the former mayor of Gdańsk, and he is opening the Citizens' Assembly. And he is actually saying just this, that when your recommendations reach this high level of support, I will treat those recommendations as binding for me, even though from the legal perspective, this is just a form of public consultation, but in reality, it's a deliberative democracy. In this photo, you can see a letter from the mayor of the city of Wrocław, and it is also highlighted there that the recommendations with this high support will be treated as binding. And there is also information for the potential assembly members that their participation will include a fee, so they like a stipend. So participants get paid in Poland, and as I remember, that's the same in the United Kingdom. So another unique feature is the governance structure. We have a coordinating team, we have a monitoring team, and we have arbitration. If you are interested in the details, you can read about all those rules and procedures with regards to how it is organized in practice in the Rivendell model, which is available on our website. And another interesting thing is that when we transmit the random selection, the final random selection is transmitted live, and we use a dice to randomly select either individual participants, assembly members, or the whole pool of them, which was used this method was used in the city of Poznań and Krakow. And we have the new advanced algorithm, maybe not advanced, but it's a new algorithm which is based on simulated annealing. And this is all just fun. And for us, fun is one of those basic standards, actually. I wanted to also share with you that in Poland, we invite all stakeholders, such as NGOs, activist groups, to present their recommendations, proposals for recommendations, and to suggest experts, for example. And the process is open. It's the same as in Ireland, actually, and I think it's a crucial point that any resident who was not randomly selected as a member of the assembly can provide input in the form of comments, suggestions, and something like this. And we have introduced this new standard, which is fun. In Polish, it's fajność. Actually, the best word to translate it is, it's more like coolness or awesomeness. So it's a very high standard. You need to run the Citizens' Assembly, and it needs to be awesome. It's not just good; it should be awesome and cool.
It should be awesome.
So,
okay.
And it's a standard. And there is this monitoring team, and their role is to make sure that it is awesome. That's how it works. There is also the standard of visibility, and it means that the citizens the residents should know that the whole process is taking place. So, for example, here you can see the posters on the bus stops, and posters is something I personally enjoy very much. This is the poster informing the residents that the letters are distributed around the city, and check your mailbox. Perhaps you have received one. And if you look closely at the scarf of this postman, it is actually a Gryffindor scarf from Harry Potter. So there is a secret detail in it. All right, and here is another one. This is an invitation to watch the meetings of the Citizens Assembly. It's from the city of Poznań. This is what the invitations look like. We send letters with invitations. There are no recruiters knocking at the door. There are letters. And this is from the city of Wrocław, 20,000 letters with invitations from the mayor ready to be delivered to the post office. And we're coming to the end. So this is also unique for Poland. And there are no tables in this room. So the groups are small, just 4 people, and there is no table facilitator. There are no tables. So, and if you would like to learn more about the experiences from Poland, there is a guide available for download in several languages. And if you'd like to contact me after the talk tonight, here is my email address. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
All right, so we now had 3 different practices, 3 different experiences. Eva, what is your first reaction? How did what stood out to you the most?
I think the differences in how much impact a citizens' assembly can make. Mm-hmm. There's a clear difference between, for instance, the UK, where, as Kathy pointed out, government only had to take note, which of course is not much of a you can't expect that will make much impact. And then there's the difference with Ireland, where there was obviously thought about how can we make sure that these recommendations are getting political follow-up. And of course in Poland, which I think is very interesting, that they even said we consider this as a binding agreement, which I think is absolutely revolutionary. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, because I think that's one of the the major vulnerabilities, I think, of citizens' assemblies, that you can have a wonderful process and very helpful people who put a lot of time and energy and effort in deliberating, in formulating these recommendations, but if in the end all those recommendations are not getting proper political follow-up, then of course it's very feeble. So that's not what you want. You want climate citizens assemblies that can actually have an impact. So I'm happy to see that there are good examples for this.
Yeah, absolutely. We're now going to have a look at what kind of lessons we can really learn from this, because I think all these 3 practices share different lessons, and we are trying to build the ultimate citizens' assembly. So we're going to try and see if we can take some of those insights from your different experiences, and we're going to look at 3 different themes. So maybe to start with this issue of the selection process and the way in which the people who participate in such a citizen assembly are being selected, how to ensure the representation of that group. If I summarize what I took from your storylines, is that at least there are a couple of important elements: the time spent, the amount of time that is being given and asked from the citizens to participate, and over the course of what amount of time in a year, whether there is compensation, yes or no, and this element of fun, or rather awesomeness. So if we look at these issues, I would like to know what are the most important, what is the most important lesson when it comes to making this selection process inclusive and representative, what would you advise someone who would start a citizen assembly somewhere this year? Maybe Art, can I start with you?
Okay, so start with the easy questions, why don't you?
Yes.
I suppose, I mean, it is the most critical issue because every citizen in a country, when they look at the membership of a citizens' assembly, has to see themselves there. You know, they have to see their viewpoint represented because there is a suspicion, and there has been a suspicion up to recently that it's like the old joke that anybody who wants to be a politician should be automatically disbarred from ever running from politics. You know, that the only people who turn up at these kind of events are people who like to get involved in these kind of events, and they're not really representative.
Yeah.
And we were really able to nail this because we used a polling company, and we were fairly satisfied that they were representative. I'll give you an example on the issue of abortion, which was very, very sensitive here. The Citizens' Assembly made recommendations for a very, very liberal abortion regime in Ireland, you know, and this was a shock to the political system because they said the Irish people will never vote for that. But the Citizens' Assembly voted by 65.5% to 35.5% to introduce this very liberal regime. The politicians thought that they would have abortion for reasons of rape, incest, or fetal abnormality, but they went much further. So this issue was put to a referendum of the Irish people to change the constitution, and the vote on the day of the entire Irish people was 66% to 34%. Yeah. They were 0.5% out. So in this instance, it's a sign of the representative nature. Nobody ever questioned the membership of the Citizens' Assembly after that, because you have to be able to demonstrate that this group can speak for all viewpoints. And I mean, if you don't have the ability to become a member, then you need to make it easy for them to make a representation that will appeal to somebody in the room that feels the same way. Yeah. You know. So I think it's really important.
Yeah. But the crucial element was actually this using the polling company in this.
Yeah, you know, I think that the polling company, it might be seen as a little wasteful, you know, because I had hoped in my mind when we sent the polling company out. I mean, I thought that this would be like Willy Wonka and getting the golden tickets, that people would be staying at home waiting for the knock on the door, hoping to be selected. But the opposite turned out to be the case. But the experience in more recent assemblies has been much more positive because there is now the brand recognition. I've been convinced by the experience in Australia, where they send out, much like marching, they send out invitations to 20,000 people, and then about 10% of them will reply. And from that 10%, 2,500, they select the 100 or 150 or something. And that will allow for, and the same in Kathy's case, you know, a more even stratification. Because in the Irish context, you know, I mean, in 100 people, 4 of them should be farmers and 8 of them should have a disability, and there should be 2 members of the travelling community, or 1 member is homeless, and all of that kind of stuff. That's really hard to do when you're randomly knocking on doors. So, I mean, I wouldn't be necessarily pushing the polling company idea because others work as well, but it has proved very positive for us.
Yeah. And Martin, if we come back to this element of fun, because I think it's quite a big commitment to make also as citizens, to invest that much time and that much energy. So the being able to make it at least an awesome experience is, I think, already something that makes it very appealing. When it comes to making this experience inclusive and also accessible to many types of people, how can fun in that sense maybe create a bridge? If we could switch to Martin. Martin. Yes.
The way we understand the standard of fun is to create an enjoyable atmosphere. It is the role of the assembly members and all the stakeholders to actually, get on this, and we are not pushing them. So we are just creating the space for it, and we are keeping this in mind that yes, that's how we would like to have this thing organized. For example, the current Citizens Assembly in the city of Poznań is organized in a fully online version. So we are missing out breaks for lunch. And that's a very important part of the assembly. Yeah. So we have decided to send gift boxes to all assembly members with coffee, tea, and chocolate. So when they come for the online meeting, then they can sip their coffee, which was especially, sent them for as because they are the assembly members. These are those things which make it this whole thing as enjoyable as possible.
Yeah.
And
but fun. What's fun for one person can also feel less fun for someone else. So how do you make sure that this is also representative of the different people that you want to attract?
Yeah, definitely. We do have also those demographic criteria. There are 4 basic ones on the local level. So it's gender, it's education, it's age, plus the city district. And for the Climate Assembly in Poznań, there is another one, the special one. What is your attitude towards climate change? Are you concerned about it, not concerned at all, and so on? So I think this one is crucial because we know that it's mostly people who are interested in the issue who volunteer to participate. And if you have this criteria, how concerned about climate change are you, you can adapt to your real situation in a city or in a country. So this was used in United Kingdom as well. So we were inspired by this. And definitely we can tell you that we have in our group among the assembly members, people who are not that concerned about climate change. And that's actually the representation of the city of Poznań, because many residents are not concerned about this issue. Some of them are very concerned, but not all of them. And we have those, let's say, skeptics in the room as well. They're present. Yeah. And this increases the credibility of the whole process. So it's not just activists.
Yeah. Eva, would you like to add?
Can I just say something on the issue of fun? Just 2 very quick examples.
Absolutely.
We had one of our meetings the weekend after Halloween. So we asked people to dress up in fancy dress for our dinner on the Saturday night. I bought a couple of dozen bottles of wine and gave wine to prizes. We had a parade, a fancy dress parade, and everybody, whether they were 80 or 18, joined into that, and it was really something. But probably the most successful experiment of fun was when we looked at the electoral system, because it came very clear to me that people didn't understand different forms of electoral systems. So I asked everybody to come up early on the Friday evening, and I gave them all ballot papers, and we asked them to choose the menu for Saturday night's dinner using ballot papers. So we chose the starter using first past the post, and everyone filled it in, put X on the spot, and we collected them and counted all the votes in front of them, said, this is how this works. And the alternative vote chose the meat or fish one, and then a trio of desserts was a 3-seater constituency to do the PRSTV, which we use in Ireland. And it was so much fun. People kind of really engaged with it, voted for kind of the chicken and the fillet steak and Caesar salad and all of these things. But by the end of it, it was like a giant penny had dropped in the room. There was a real understanding amongst the citizens about how various different electoral systems, and it's that kind of, and it's not a game. It was deadly serious because we had a very serious outcome in mind. Yeah. But you have to find a fun way of doing these things.
Yeah. Thank you. Eva, would you like to react or add something before we go to the issue of the political mandate?
Well, I think political mandate is crucial. So, I'm very curious about Kathy's perspective on this, because I know there is much to say about perhaps the lack of mandate on the UK Citizens Assembly. So perhaps Kathy could could say something about that.
Well, yeah, I don't really have that much to say about that because I think it's a very difficult one to achieve. The mandate, I mean, Martin has managed, and we, in fact, use his, we use the basic standards as a measure for citizens' assemblies. And what was I going to say? Sorry, I just forgot what I was going to say. Is that, yes, the 80%, we try to hold that up as something to aim for, that recommendations are implemented, actioned, but it's very difficult, particularly in the UK, with the current government that we have. They have taken a position slightly against citizens' assemblies because of extinction, because of their attitude towards Extinction Rebellion. So that has affected how willing they are to take it on. I mean, it's a loss of power. I think the politicians just see it too much as a loss of power. But I did want to say something, in fact, about the previous.
Yes, go ahead.
Before, that, I think it's proven that for many people who take part in citizens' assemblies, the whole experience is very enjoyable, and because they go on a challenging learning journey, and I think it's very valuable and life-enhancing for many of them. They feel the feedback is that lots of people afterwards feel much more confident to engage in political decision making, and they're more interested in getting involved. So that it's a very and lots of people who've taken part in citizens' assemblies have changed the direction of their careers as a result. And the other thing I just wanted to say about, sorry, now I'm going back to, as I've moved back, and I apologise for that, but I think it's really important in the selection process that voices that are not usually heard are there. And I think you have to maybe reach out to people to make them, a lot of people might think, oh, I can't do that, I haven't got the ability. And I think there needs to be a real input into that. I know in the case of the CAUK, attention was given to the most deprived areas. They use the postal system, and they use the most deprived areas to ensure that they got a better response rate.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, just to continue on that, because maybe if we keep all three of you together for a minute, because the issue of trust, I think, is a very important one, both on the side of the government towards the citizens, and then what kind of mandate do you also give such an initiative, but also from the citizens towards the government, that they will actually also do that, or at least consider the recommendations that are being taken, or that you use a legal framework to really ensure that when a specific benchmark point has been reached, that it will actually be a binding recommendation that the government has to follow. So if we look at those different cases, and you see that all three of them have different results, they have different experiences, different processes as well. What is the most important element when it comes to this issue of trust? How can we make sure that such a citizen initiative doesn't harm the trust of either side? I'm just checking who of you would like to respond to that.
Maybe I might say something just briefly on that particular point. We learned an awful lot from the experience of the grandfather of citizens' assemblies run by Ken Carty in British Columbia in Canada, where they had an assembly, 150 people, spent 2 years looking at their electoral system. And then they sent the report to the parliament saying, we've really looked at this and here's a whole series of recommendations. That report lay on a shelf for 3 years before anybody picked it up, because they didn't know who these people were. I mean, where did it come from? They knew nothing about it. They weren't involved in the creation. every citizen assembly that has been created in Ireland is a creature of the Parliament and the government. The government bring forward a motion to say that we would like to create a citizen assembly to do the following thing, and both houses of Parliament have to approve it. So there is a connection to it. And it was easier for me on the first one, because there were politicians on the assembly itself, on the Constitutional Convention. So when the report went back to be debated in Parliament, we had 33 politicians who were able to stand up and say, yes, I was at that weekend, this works, and there is an ownership. And that ownership issue is something now that France is having a problem with this right now on their climate change report, because the citizens have reported, and the political system doesn't really yet know how to deal with it, you know, and so there is an ownership issue here, and it's really, really important. And if you make it a creature of the political system, then it tends to work, or has a better chance.
Yes. Kathy?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think education is really an important feature here, because if people, the general public, hardly anybody in the UK knew that the Citizens Assembly was taking place. And as a result, there was not likely to be public buy-in. If people don't understand what it is and its powers and how collective intelligence brings about a sort of a better decision making because of the diverse thinking and experience of the people in the room, compared to the politicians who are of all pretty similar backgrounds, educations, etc. But people need to know about it. There needs to be publicity is really key. I know that in Poland, that is one of the important, in fact, it's one of the standards, in fact, in Martin's document, is that it's an important event and everybody needs to know about it. In France, it was, by the end, quite a lot of people knew about it. But in the UK, hardly anybody knew it was going on at all, unless you're in that little deliberative democracy bubble. And so if you want people and politicians to buy in it and see it as legitimate, they have to understand.
And what do you think, Kathy, because you are connected to a grassroots organization, Extinction Rebellion. What do you think the role is of such a grassroots organization as the one that you're part of? How does that impact the way in which you can create that awareness and that education? What's the role?
What's the role? Well, at the beginning, when we were allowed out, it would be out on the streets and in Parliament Square. We would do people's assemblies just to give people the experience of deliberation in groups. But now, I mean, we do talks regularly, and we reaching out as far as possible to students, the transition town. Haven't got any with the unions yet, but the idea is for people to give people the basic understanding so that they can go and talk to other people. And the more you talk about it, the more people understand about it. And lobbying your MPs is another thing that.
And what was the role?
Has a role.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the situation in Poland, because as Martin also said, Fridays for Future and other grassroots organizations also played an important part to actually getting those citizens' assemblies on the political agenda. Could you tell more about that?
But the key actually is the political will. So we were it was a long process for us in Poland. And before the citizens' assemblies, before the first one in the city of Gdańsk with the political buy-in, we had participatory budgeting, you know, and it spread from Sopot. And then politicians on the local level, they have realized, oh, this thing works, you know, we can trust in the decisions made by the citizens. And I think that this introduction to participatory democracy was very important, because a couple of years later, when I met the mayor of Gdańsk and I proposed to him the idea for a citizens' assembly, he just agreed to it. And then I asked, would you agree also for a binding recommendations? And he said, yes, I would. So this was this like pre-paving, is, I hope that's the right way, like creating the road to it. So or preparing the ground. That's the word. So, and then because why it was easy, for example, in Warsaw or in Krakow for the activists from Fridays for the Future, because first of all, politicians understood public participation, and then there was a local law which you could have used. So, and this local law was created a couple of years before. So there is like a road to it. And I certainly understand that for some politicians who don't have experience with public participations, when you tell them, oh, well, you can organize a citizens assembly, this is like way too much. So I think that this actually example from Ireland, when you did have politicians as members of a citizens assembly, I wouldn't recommend it in Poland like right now, because I think we have already done our homework. But I think this ownership is what Art has emphasized. This is crucial. And the ownership part, we try to include in how we design the process. And what I mean by this, that, for example, when we do it on the local level, the civil servants present the background of a situation as experts. And they can also comment, they can review the recommendations before they go to the final vote. So, and this engagement in the process by civil servants, I see it as totally crucial.
Mm-hmm. So, and you say mixing the politicians with the citizens, I wouldn't recommend that, but this engagement with the civil servants, that's where you would have to put your energy towards. Yes. Why does that make such a difference? If you create the rules of the assembly, why is that such a fundamental difference? Because you also need the politicians, as Art also explained. You need a politician to stand up and say, "I was there, I was in this assembly." So why is this so crucial? This difference for you?
Well, because okay. So first of all. The key element is when you have ownership, then you have this political will to implement those recommendations. And and for civil servants, for city councillors, for the mayor, it is important, to be part of this. So it's not like completely outside thing, like the closed jury. And from my perspective, this engagement of civil servants in the process creates the sense of ownership, and then it translates into implementing the recommendations. That's why I think it's crucial. However, in our situation in Poland, with all those experiences, I don't think that we would need to mix in politicians in our group. So in the case of the abortion citizens assembly in Ireland, they were citizens only.
Yeah, the last two were citizens only. And funnily, this was by accident rather than design, that there were politicians in the first one and not in the second two. Okay. But having been through the experience of the first one, that was enough for the political system to engage and to take ownership of it, because, we did that thing, it works all right. So whatever comes in the future. So
the trust was created at that point, so you could continue.
The brand was so strong, the political brand was so strong of the model that was enough.
Yeah.
Can I just, I know we're almost running out of time, but just one point, and it was one of the real challenges that we had, and which is probably relevant to any discussion about climate change, is the experience of asking even a group of 100 people, even a binary question. So we asked our group of 100 people, should we reduce the presidential term from 7 years to 5 years? And they said, they answered that question, but also made recommendations on the nomination process, the candidacy arrangements, political donation limits during the campaign, etc. So, I mean, when you look at constitutional and legislative issues, your ankle bone is connected to your elbow, because it's so hard even to answer a binary question with 100 people. So when you get into the much wider questions, like what are we going to do to fix climate change, you really have to be conscious of how you manage that discussion and that debate, because you can be down Alice in Wonderland's rabbit hole before you know it.
Yeah.
And I was intrigued by the Scottish experience from last year. You know, the question that their Citizens Assembly was asked was, what kind of Scotland do you want to live in? You know, and that to me is like eating an elephant. You know, is that how on earth are you going to manage that?
Yeah. So you have to be very careful with how broad or how narrow you frame the question. Yes.
Yeah, and if it is a broad question, then the architecture of how you deal with it. I mean, we had this issue with gender equality.
Yeah.
You know, we dealt with it from a legal and moral, with domestic violence,
No,
role of women at home, and all that.
We're gonna round up because our time is almost finished.
Yeah. But I'm very curious because Kathy, you also have in your presentation you said there is you frowned upon the question posed in Great Britain. Could you very briefly give us a suggestion? What do we need to? What can we learn from the UK? What should be done better, perhaps, if we can learn?
Right. Well, I think in the case that neither the government's target nor XR's target should be imposed on the Assembly, a Citizens Assembly should decide itself. That's the work that it does. If they'd listened to the evidence, they would have come to their own conclusions, hearing a fair wide, and they were boxed in, if you like. It was too controlled. The agenda in the UK was actually controlled by the select committees. They framed the question, so it needs to come out. It needs to be independent. It was too narrow. It was only UK based. They didn't count other emissions. Publicity was missing. It was too local. They didn't address any global issues, and it was too weak.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a lot of recommendations we can take into account.
Yes. Yeah. Unfortunately, we already have to round up. But I think what stuck with me most was the idea that actually to create a space for a citizen assembly to actually work and really gain traction and gain this political brand, you need to first make some people involved, be it a mayor inspired by activist groups, or be it politicians who actually participate in one, to see how it works, so that then they can later also trust on its working. But without the role of the grassroots movement inspiring and pushing to get there, I think the instrument itself will remain lacking. Yeah. What was the most important thing that you took? Well,
that's
from
of course
this discussion?
Very important. Also in the mandate, of course, to make sure that the recommendations actually will be implemented in a way. And of course also that the rest of society is also connected and in tune with the Citizens Assembly. So, for instance, in Poland, where everybody in the city knows there is a Citizens Assembly going on, that people feel connected, that they feel represented by the Citizens Assembly, I think that's an important takeaway.
So the importance of not creating another bubble.
Exactly, yes.
All right, thank you so much. I wish we could continue this conversation for another hour, but we're going to round up for now. Luckily, we have the second session coming up on May 19th. So I hope all of you will tune in again then at that time, again here at Pakhuis de Zwijger. Thanks so much to the speakers. Thanks so much to Eva and our 3 speakers on Zoom for being here. Everybody who's interested to learn more, keep an eye out. Our website is going to be growing and growing with information on Climate Citizens Assemblies. And again, as mentioned before, if you are active in this field and you want to become a part of the project, want to connect with us, please send an email to me and I will keep you in the loop. Thank you so much again, Martin, Art, and Kathy, and of course Eva, and see you next time. Thank you very much.